Hello Facebook. Oh, it's cold today, I have to say. We're at the Buttermarket of Canterbury, and today we're going to take you on a little gentle stroll around the city of Canterbury, from the Buttermarket around to the through the Canterbury Gate and into Butchery Lane, and then see what we go after that. Hope it might look okay. I'm going to swap round now so we can see. Well, I'll do a little sort of tour virtual of the Buttermarket behind me. If you look up there behind me, you can see Christchurch Gate at the top of it's a Cathedral Gate Hotel. And then around here behind me we've got the old Warren's Bakery, and then behind me we've got the old White Bull Inn, etc. And the Buttermarket pub and the Canterbury Pottery, as well as Loke Shoemaker and Fancy That of London. Although I've never understood why Fancy That of London is in Canterbury, but there you go, it's a mystery. So we're going to start our journey now as we reverse round. 8 viewers, excellent, right? So welcome to the Buttermarket. Now if you look directly ahead of us over here, we've got the great memorial here, which was erected in 1921 by a man called Field Marshal Earl Haig, and he built it because he lost his own son at a place called Thiepval in northern France. And it's a very sad story, but he was the one who gave us the poppy appeal. And although I can't sort of zoom in here, I'm going to try and do a better version later on. It says quite clearly, unveiled by Field Marshal the Earl Haig, dedicated by the Archbishop of Canterbury, October the 10th, 1921. Now, you might think that's a bit odd because the First World War ended in 1919, but in fact, the war continued on until the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1921, and that's when these memorials were unveiled. And this one, particularly, the names upon the memorial for the Great War were all dedicated to those men who were born within a mile of this memorial, and the idea really was to make it more poignant. As we look around the edge of the memorial, oh crap, we're going to trip over the bloody thing. Look on the edge of the memorial, you can see the names of all the families that passed away in the front line, what you might call PALS regiments. So plenty of people who worked together in factories joined up at the same time. You also notice an extra plaque on the end of there of Mrs. Goldfarb, whose body was found on the front line more recently and added on. And then below, we've got a slightly more recent dedication from 1945, the Second War. It wasn't really called the Second World War until many years later, sometime around the 1960s. Just in our current psyche, we think of First and Second World War. The First World was always called the Great War, the war to end all wars. Of course, that didn't really achieve anything, did it? As you see, lovely blue sky up there today. And the Buttermarket memorial list was, put out in 1921. Before, on this location, was the Marlowe Memorial, which now stands outside the Marlowe Theatre. That was erected here in 1893, which is the anniversary of Christopher Marlowe's death. And we're going to cover Christopher Marlowe later on our tour, because we're going to one of his old haunts, literally, haunts, and where he lived for a little while before his demise in a tavern brawl in Deptford. Now, the Buttermarket itself is lovely and quiet today. In previous years, it's been full of hordes of little darlings from France and Belgium. But what we're going to do is look around bits of the square that we may not notice. So even if you're local and you come around the square, you probably haven't really had a chance to look at. So if we look up there, we can see the sign saying the old Buttermarket or Buttermarket. It was only called the Buttermarket from 1645 onwards, which is when Oliver Cromwell renamed it during the Civil War. He was appalled by the bull baiting that was going on in this square here. So for many years, this area was called the Bull Stake. And the Bull Stake was actually located again where the Memorial Cross is now. And the Bull Stake was where they used to tie up bulls and bait them with dogs and bears. Now, we might think of bullfighting as being a Spanish thing, but in fact, most of the Saxon world used bull baiting as a form of sport. And the bulls were usually run at about 5 o'clock in the morning into this sort of area through the city streets. There was a bell rung called the curfew bell, first rung at 8 o'clock at night, and that's why we have pub names in England like 8 Bells. But at 5 o'clock in the morning, they let all the sheep and cattle out in the streets, and the bulls would often run through the streets, and they were gathered here. They were chased into this area by bull terriers and bull mastiffs. And when they were chased in here, the bull mastiffs were actually designed to rip the heart and lungs out of a bull while it was still alive. They'd been attacked by the bears. But the bulldogs, which we often think of a British bulldog, short, stocky little dog, was there actually to protect the bull from being attacked by other dogs or animals. So it's a kind of team sport, if you like. And although the bears came mainly from Eastern Europe, they were brought in and chained up. You find there's a pub, or there was a pub in Roscommon called the Dog and Bear. Hi, Rita. And some pub names like that we still find in not so much in the city. Remember, we had 365 pubs within our city walls, and although you might think it's a bit of a static video, there are real people moving around, as you can see there. Coming back to the Buttermarket, when the bulls were tied up to this stake, they were attacked by these dogs. So a bulldog is a protected dog, but a bull mastiff, particularly designed to rip the heart and lungs out of a bull while it's still alive. And the terrier was designed to chase the bull. You want to be on the video, do you, Rita? Okay, you can press your button and come and join us. Now, the Buttermarket Square has changed a bit over the years. The bulls were dragged from where we stand now into this area, which is now called Loke's Shoemakers over here. And that was a place called Slaughterman's Alley. The structure above it was only added on about 1646 onwards, and we'll cover that later on as well. So if you see there, that was called Slaughterman's Alley, and so a bull was dragged into Slaughterman's Alley to be slaughtered, beyond which was a place called Skinner's Alley, where the skins were taken off it, and the skins were taken down to the tannery. Our tannery in Canterbury was until recently one of the greatest tanneries in the world, and used to make the leather for Rolls-Royce and Ferrari and Lamborghini. But sadly that's all gone now, because it did make a smell, to be fair, and we did have a smell in Hill. What we have is loads and loads of housing down there. I'm sure those people living in the old tannery site will probably be thinking to themselves, what was it like then? Well, it used to be a funny old place. I remember on my last year of school, I went down wearing shorts to look around the tannery because I was interested, really, and I was shown around by the foreman, and the smell that we used to get of the tannery was actually taking the hair off the skin. It's called eviscerating, and it was basically acid which burned off the skin, and then the skins were dried and then tanned later on. It's a fascinating process. So if you have a chance to look up the tanning process, do have a look. They still do tanning in a place called Schwabenheim in Germany, and in North America and Italy too. But Canterbury had a tanning place here. I mean, we have tanning salons now, but they're actually tanning leather here rather than human skin. And from Skinner's Alley down there, the bull was dragged into a lane. If I can use my stick, that makes no sense otherwise. I come into picture here. So there was a lane that ran off that way, which is called Skinner's Alley, and Skinner's Alley ran into Butchery Lane, where the bulls were butchered and then sold by butchers in the butcher's shops. Now, this is all being covered over with these new buildings, and if you look above us, you can see the structure looks to many like brick. It's very neatly covered brick. You see how clearly that line of brick goes, and if you look around there, you can see just on the corner. You can't really zoom in, but under the sign of Buttermarket, you can see there's quite a shallow edge where it joins the leadwork. It's come a bit closer around here. So on the very edge of number 38, as it's called, which is either 38 Buttermarket, I'm not sure. Up there you can see how thin the bricking is. It's not really brick at all. It's called mathematical tiling. And mathematical tiling was introduced in around 1687 when King Charles II introduced it to pay for all sorts of wars he was having, and maybe a second parliamentary act. And brick tax meant that you would charge 1 penny per 1,000 bricks, which may not seem a lot of money, but you think of a building this size, think how many bricks you would have in this structure here. And it became a fashion. Initially there was no tax attached to mathematical tile, and most of the cities actually built of this mathematical tile. You'll see certain areas as we go around. In fact, if you look over there above Canterbury Pottery, you can just about see there's sort of a bit of a line running up the side of the building where the plasterwork's falling away. You can see how shallow that brick line is, less than 1/3 of an inch deep. So although it looks like brick, it's actually mathematical tile. And where you see the word ceramic studio, for example, that's a piece of wood, a wood batten with plaster laid on top of it to make it look like a solid piece of brick, and again mathematical tiling wedged into place. So it's a Georgian rebuild. And look at the very front edge of that. You can see there's a sort of lip to it. You can see up where the drain pipe comes down. In that, if I use my pointy stick, that area where the lip comes down there, the drain pipe. This is a Georgian add-on to make it look more modern. It's a Regency thing. They used to put a straight edge on a medieval property to make it look more modern. And that's what we see here in so many properties in the city of Canterbury. You can see the clouds moving very happily there, and old telephone areas up there. Now I'm going to change hands momentarily, just while I get my stick in my other hand. And as we look around this place, it's also important to look beneath your feet in Canterbury. I know I've spent a lot of time talking about looking above your heads. If you look over here, using my stick, you can see this trapdoor. This is well, you might think it might be storage for fancy that I've done, but originally this was a pub entranceway, and you'll find lots of these pub entranceways as we walk around. This one here is, well, it's in pretty bad nick, sadly. There's another one over here above Loke Shoemakers in the ground. Another one over here by the pottery. Look over here. There's another one in there. And then another one by the old Buttermarket pub. There's another one. And then a third one, or a fifth one, if you look over here, right by the old Shakespeare. That one there. So we've basically got the entrance to 5 pubs in the space of 5 yards. Now we're going to go back towards the memorial here, just to have a look around again. And thanks for all your comments, by the way. That's very kind of you think I'm a great tall city guide. There aren't many around at the moment. I seem to be the only one. So hopefully using the possibility of using sort of things like Facebook Live, we can sort of keep the world going. It's a very pretty structure. At the top, by the way, is the Canterbury Cross. That's an image that we have in our minds of particularly a Canterbury thing. Oh, there you go, people waving at me. You're going to wave them. So wave back at them. Hi. Thanks. And so you can see I'm popular there with living people as well. And the city is... it really has changed a bit over the years. It's always sad when you look at the city with no people in it. Although we moaned about the tourists when they were here, well, I can't do without them, sadly. Although, of course, I didn't really have many big French groups. Now, coming back to the Buttermarket Square itself, the building in the corner for many years was called the Olive Branch, named after the image of a man holding an olive branch in his hand in the middle of Christchurch Gate. Unfortunately, because Christchurch is now covered with scaffolding for a couple of years, we can't really see that clearly. I'll put a post up later on of the image that I have of what's called the naked man lying on his back. It's basically an image of Henry VIII lying naked before God with an olive branch in his hand. Hi, Angela Richmond. Great, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Now, the ceramic studio, etc., over there were all little pubs. And if you look at the fan lights, which are the bit above the door, you see that sort of see that little image there, right above the Canterbury Pottery door. You can see it's actually called the Sun Inn. You see the image of the sun there in the fan light. It's often called a quarter light because it's 1/4 of the length of the doorway down below. So that's what a quarter light's called. And look at the doorstep there itself. You see how badly worn it is over time. That's granite. And it's basically worn down. You can see they even sort of had to make a new valance in front of their their front doorstep to make it right. And looks like this piece of wood, which is I knew when this was put in only a couple of months ago. Well, actually, last year the Canterbury Pottery. It has been there forever, hasn't it? It was straight, true, and square. So it was obviously swollen over time with all that water we had, and. It's funny, though, this was a pub, and it's been many things over years, but so pub there, and then this bit here, I remember from my childhood, or not childhood, but when I was a teenager, you used to be able to run through here to the back of what's called Victoria Wines, and there used to be a walk through there on the side. That's all been filled in now, but that's the side of the old Buttermarket pub. When they were restoring this place in the 1980s, they found the Tudor kitchens underneath here. So in this section below, which is now the cellars, they found a Tudor kitchen and they found bread ovens still with bread in them. Amazing. So the city of Canterbury changed very little. The inn in the corner here, often regarded as being here for years, was many years ago the Talisman, run by a woman who lived in Chilham, and it's actually part of this inn over here, which is called the White Bull Inn. And it was for a little while called this one over here, which is now called the old Buttermarket, and formerly the Olive Branch was called the Black Boy Inn. Not a racial slur, but simply there was a bathroom in the upstairs rooms where the chimney boys and coal boys would have their weekly bath. Now, I know you're probably thinking to yourself, chimney boys. Well, chimney boys were popular until about 1868 or so, when there was a poem written called The Water Babies about children who were being used as chimney boys. It was abolished soon after that. But there are plenty of little holes in the ground, which you can see as we go around, which are chimney boy holes, where chimney boys are basically shoved into the cellar to access the chimneys themselves and climb through. If a chimney boy died in the process of his work, you simply went to the orphanage and got another one, because there was 2 a penny at that time. So here we can see the brass plaque on the outside, which reminds us of the old Black Boy Inn. You see it says there. Take it down slightly. So I'm not making it up, it's all true. And it says there are tunnels. Now, there always was a suggestion that pilgrims arriving late in the city would use tunnels to access the Cathedral of Canterbury, which is practically just behind those buildings over there. So it's quite possible they had connecting tunnels from the pubs to the what's called the Altar of the Crossed Swords, or even the Undercroft, and from there a guardian monk would charge you a groat or maybe 2 to take you to the Blissful Martyrs Shrine. A bit like tour guides today. You pay them an extra £1, they'll take you to a special place that nobody's been to. Now we're going to step back again. You probably think yourself, we spent a lot of time at the Buttermarket, but there's so much history around here. We're trying to make it as best we can and make good value for you. Those who are contributing kindly to my fighting fund to keep yourself going and not dead on the waters. Coming back over there, we've got Christchurch Gate itself. And although I often spend a lot of time talking about Christchurch Gate, because it's all covered in scaffolding, it's not the most attractive view. But I say we'll put a post link. What the hell? It's a vitally important journey there. He's delivering curry, probably. Let's make our way. Sorry, politically incorrect. Warning. Oh no, he's going to stop there. That's Mercery Lane, mate. Okay, obviously Mercery Lane designed for huge white vans, and that's probably why there's not much of Mercery Lane left. But let's walk to the gateway for a minute, just to have a look at the images. Now, I've recently done some photography work on repainting the Christchurch doorway, just to illuminate some of the bits that we don't really notice. And if we look at the door itself, I can't film inside it because they're a bit funny about filming. So if we look at these great lions down here, see the lion-shaped faces down here, and in the very bottom by his chin, or I can point with my stick again, you can see there, you can see a little Tudor rose sort of hidden there. Now these doors were restored in 1660 by King Charles II, and if we look closely here, you can see the images again of a Tudor rose, but also notice that these oak leaves. I can't really show them very clearly, but I'll come as close as I can. So you can see oak leaves and then acorns there as well. And if we come back a little way further and then look up, we can see the cornucopia. Now the cornucopia, which is basically a Greek thing about wealth of fruit and things to eat. This is a pomegranate, and here's a Tudor rose, and over here we've got an ear of corn. This is to commemorate Henry VIII. The pomegranate is a symbol of Catherine of Aragon, and then if you look above, we also got this crest of this is the See of Canterbury. That's the surplice of an archbishop, and on the archbishop's surplice we have blades to remind us of people who killed Thomas Becket. It actually has more than 4 blades on it, but the original version had just 1 blade on each quarter and then one in the middle. And either side over here, this shape is the symbol of Thomas Becket's personal crest. Now we see these heads of men with earrings. These are allegedly part of the retinue of Thomas Becket's family. In around 900 AD, the Becket family were involved in a battle in a place called Niger, and the King of Niger granted the Becket family, as a result of winning this battle defending the king, the retinue of 4 men from the Niger region to work for Thomas Becket. They weren't paid, but they weren't slaves. They were basically given retinue, and they were still on his crest. If you see this crest above St. Thomas's Hospital in St. Peter Street, you'll still notice the darkened skin colour here. Look above again, you can see the cornucopia again. You've got the pomegranate, and then you've got ears of corn again, and it has been a bit restored. You can see there's a bit of new wood up there. There's little angels with golden stuff on it. But the boss nails themselves, quite interesting. When they restored them, they found they were originally, as you can see here on this one up here, I can point that one there, they're supposed to be Tudor roses. So it's all basically in honour of Henry VIII. And but again, most people never really look around these gates, but very beautifully carved of solid English oak. So come closer in there, you can have a look in there quite clearly at some of this carving. It's very beautiful. And I'm not sure if the smaller door's open. It's probably closed at the moment. This I won't film inside, but if we look above the doorway, you can see up there in the very middle, you can see a sort of baby there with an olive branch. That's supposedly Henry VIII, naked before God. The discoloration of the damage is caused by coal fires, soot and stuff, and that's going to be cleaned off. That's the plan. And above the crest of Thomas Goldstone, a man with 3 golden balls, grandfather of David Beckham. What do you reckon? Maybe not. Maybe patron saint of pawnbrokers. He was the sub-prior of Canterbury Cathedral when this was being constructed. The gateway stands on the site of where the Sun Inn used to stand, and the Sun Inn used to stand just over there where it says Cathedral Gate Hotel. They changed the name in around 1953 because Powell and Pressburger filmed here in the 1940s a film called A Canterbury Tale, which is a lovely film if you had a chance to see it. There's lots of carvings around the apex of this doorway, and I'll try to pan up so you can see it. You can see here these looks like the sort of the bodies falling off this thing. These creatures of the woods, are they frogs? It's not quite clear. You see really long legs. This one over here at least. But the discoloration of soot has made it very impossible to really recognise what these things are. But we think these are all brightly painted in greens and reds and things, with little images up there. And if we look around here as well, we can see the far side. There's lots of little sort of goblin-type creatures up here, but lots of Tudor roses mixed in there too. So when they were designing this place, we assumed that they were looking forward to Henry VIII coming down here at some point and opening it. The suggestion is it opened in about 1519, but it was designed not for Henry VIII, but for his brother, Prince Arthur, who was the one who married Catherine of Aragon. But he died at Ludlow Castle of something akin to malaria, or bad air, mal-airier, and that's all that we know at the moment. If you look in the middle up there, see it there, just there. I can't really see it clearly myself. That's the naked man lying on his back. So that's the true image of Henry VIII, lying with an olive branch in his hand. So that was the idea that people would see that and say, "Oh, the king is naked before God, innocent as the day is born." The damage around the side here, this damage here, is caused by a malevolent force called the BBC. When they drove their vehicles in here in the 50s, they assumed that the medieval designers had allowed the fact that pantechnicons would come in here. Interesting enough, the height of this doorway and the dimensions are the width and height of a hay wain, a fully laden hay wain, and that's because until the 1530s, the Church of Rome demanded that every member of the congregation gave 1/10 their wealth, called a tithe, to the cathedral. So this, you could call this a tithe doorway, a big door to one side, and then over here the smaller doorway. The theory being that you would walk in or drive in with your cart of hay and straw, and they would just walk out with your body through the smaller door. But the dimensions are pretty akin to a tithe doorway. So both tithe barns have a big door and a little door to one side. Now we're coming back out towards the Buttermarket now as the rest of the world seems to be coming alive, and you can look down the Buttermarket or the Burgate Street there. The Burgate originally comes from the Saxon language Burgussa, or Burgate, meaning gateway to the outside world, and the language we speak today is always a mix of French, Latin, German and all sorts of other languages. It's a bastardised language. Looking at the outside of it here, we can see just a corner of if you point up there, you see this section here. There's a completely fake frontage they put on the front of Mercery Lane to make it look more modern. Again, that Regency thing of making everything look more modern. Now we're going to continue over back in the Buttermarket. You're probably thinking, I didn't realise there was much in the Buttermarket. Well, if you look at these windows above the Shakespeare pub, you'll also see over here the window line of what was called the White Bull Inn. It was only restored in the 1980s, and when they were doing the restoration they found lots of original bits of wood in place. They had heavily restored it, but let's have a closer look at the window line. If we look up here, you can see where the arches join this long piece of wood that runs the width of the building down here. That's called the window line, and you'll notice an original bricked-in medieval window there. There was a period of English history where we had something called glass tax. Glass tax introduced in the 1770s to pay for the War of the Americas, and that became so prohibitively expensive. It's actually cheaper to brick the windows in and pay brick tax than it was to pay glass tax. So that's how we got the expression daylight robbery. But going back to this structure here, when they were doing the restoration, they found a couple of original windows here intact with original panes of glass in them. We don't think they're very early, probably about 1660, but still gives an impression of how bloody miserable cold it must have been. So where the archway joins the window line, that's where the windows are supposed to be located. We see over here the Victorians have cut holes in the old medieval structure and they've filled in the gaps. So there would have been a bank of probably a couple of windows here, and then another couple of windows here, and then as you can see there's one little window left over here, and they would have gone over there as well. This has been not Victorianised, probably sort of Georgianised by putting these new extra windows. These are sash windows. Sash windows are designed to be used by young ladies living their own in a house. The idea was there was a counterweight which was equally balanced to the weight of the top section of glass, so you could lift and open the window just by using a couple of fingers. Men obviously needed to be there if you needed to open any more of that, little darlings. But this is now part of a doctor's residence. It's called Angel Court. We'll go there later on. It's bloody freezing out, so my fingers are cold. Now, originally, before the glass came into England, about 1660, most windows were owned with the elements and sealed with something called a window board. The window board was simply a piece of wood that slotted into that section there. You see, if you look closely, you can see it's actually a square edge, but the carved edge, which they put in the middle of it, makes it look a more rounded window. But the window board was the inside, and it created what's called a window ledge. We now say window ledge on the outside. Originally, the window ledge would have been the inside. And basically it dropped down in the morning for you to scrape the bedding out of the windows. This inn, like so many, was designed and built many years ago. Cathedral records and archaeological examinations suggest it was built around 900 AD and built before the death of Thomas Becket. It was a pilgrim's inn for the shrine of St Augustine. And pilgrims are coming here in their droves and they needed somewhere to sleep. Now, in the mornings, you used to turf out the bedding, because they didn't change the bedding truly every day. It's usually every 7 days. And they used to shout a warning in the French language. Now, I'm sure all those watching speak fluent French. But the French word for here comes a bucket of poo, which would have been pretty mucky old excrement, was regarde de l'eau, look out for water with lumpy bits. Now, we English can never pronounce the foreign language, so we'd like to shout loudly in English with a foreign accent. And we call this franglais. I mean, when I go to France, I go, bonjour, monsieur, je suis les anglais de France, Jean, mon cher, les bois, avez-vous les bières? And I go, oh, are you English? And you go, well, there you go, see, they speak English. And most French people speak English, the same with most English people don't speak French. But looking at the inn, if you imagine standing below here with some blokes shouting in a foreign language, even if you were Norman and you didn't recognise the word, when we added the English accent to the French word regarde de l'eau, we got the word gardez-lou, gardez-lou. We still use the word loo when we talk about going to the loo to this day. Well, when you see the overhanging jetted frontages, you might wonder, is this why they always built in this way? But it wasn't simply about the poo, it was because the land tax, which is the base of the inn, was actually measured on something called a rod, pole or perch, which is a measurement used by a sheriff, and a sheriff was basically a king's tax collector. He would measure the distance from one end here, right the way round to the other end over here, right around the edge of the inn. Charged at £1 per pole. It could be a lot of money, but if you're building jutted upwards and outwards, they didn't charge you for these extra spaces here. So although you were exposing over King's land, you only paid the basic land tax, and those land tax records are still in existence in the House of Parliament. So if you really want to learn about what property was in Canterbury in the early days, really early days, you can get a record from Parliament of the land tax collections, and those land tax give accurate records of who paid the land tax and who the landlord was. So if you're a lady walking past these inns, you might get a protection from the overhang, and that's one of the reasons that when people say, are you a gentleman, how can you tell? It's because if you're walking down the street, let's say that way, if you're walking that way, the lady gets the overhang and the gentleman gets the splash. The theory being that if there's a cart coming past, then the gentleman gets a splash too. And that's why we still say, ladies first and things like that. Maybe shit flying around. Ladies first, probably not. The accent I speak in, by the way, in case you're wondering, I am posh. Well, am I posh? I don't think so. I'm a pretty ordinary sort of bloke. But let me just turn my face back so you can see my freezing cold lips. Now, people say, are you posh? I'm not really posh, but I speak with what is regarded as received pronunciation. And RP is comes from the BBC. When the BBC started transmitting radio signals in the 1920s, lovely sound of somebody sawing somebody's leg off there. When they were broadcasting signals, they wanted a really easy to understand accent. And when you went to Oxford or Cambridge, you'd hear the Oxford professors enunciating clearly because they didn't have amplifiers. You could hear them clearly at the front and the back. Now, in the case of the Oxford professors, a lot of them came down to work for the BBC as announcers, and those announcers became, gave us the version of what we call BBC English, so clipped English accent. Now, for those of you who want to sound posh, I can't imagine why you would, but when this is all over, you might want to make a booking for a luxury restaurant in London, and you might want to think a bit of posh accent might get you a table quicker. I think it's unlikely. But just repeat these words with me, so you can enunciate. Now, when I was at school, I was taught to speak posh because when I came here, I came from Bristol, so I spoke like that with a West Country accent, like that. And I was bullied by the boys at school because I always spoke like that, so like carrot cruncher like that, Jethro. And I had to basically learn how to speak posh, sort of peer pressure. And my housemaster took me to one side one day and explained that the best way to speak posh is to enunciate clearly through your teeth. So, although I haven't got a mask on, it's probably easier with a mask. What we used to do was to hold our breath and inhale through our nose and exhale through our mouth, and we would have to keep our tongue close to our teeth when we said something. So we had to keep our mouth open like this, and we exhaled through our mouth like that. So we almost as if we were smiling, but weren't really smiling at all. And basically 3 words make one word. So the first word we came up with was the word air. So with a mouth open, you say the word air. Say it with me, air. But with your mouth closed, you go air, air. Okay. The second word was the word hair, as in the hair on your head, a bit like 3-line mnemonics. And hair on your head is hair, like that. But with your mouth closed, you go hair, hair, hair. So clenched teeth. The last word was where a monster takes his prey, the word lair, or what we find in the middle of a Victoria sponge. And so teeth together, lair, lair. Now, if you put the 3 words together, you get the word hello, hello, hello. And there, of course, is posh. I mean, once you do that, job's your oyster, eh? Oh, bloody fantastic. So you've learned a bit more of my weird accent. Now, speaking of the accent we speak today, it's also the languages we mix together. So the languages of Middle English, which is German, French from the court, and Latin from the church were joined together in 1538 in what's called the Reformation, when the Church of England split from the Church of Rome, or was created from the Church of Rome. And that's because rich people from court had to start talking to poor people to communicate, and the clergy had to go to the Crown to find out what was going on there as well. And so we'll just turn back towards looking at the Buttermarket itself. Oh, there you go. Cindy J. Oh, you want to send me a message, do you? Now, looking directly over here, this building, which wasn't until recently Warren's Bakery, is one of the few structures was actually built of real brick in the city of Canterbury, built around 1851. Brick tax and glass tax was abolished in 1851. That's why the Great Exhibition of 1851 was built of steel and glass. It was asked by Prince Regent, well, that was Prince Albert, to Parliament if they could abolish glass tax, and it was actually granted. So if you look again at the Buttermarket now, you notice the straight line edge, which you get at the front down here, and the jiggity-jaggedy roofs above. Hi, Kim. Hello. There we go. Hello. Now, we're going to go into the Burgate again. We can see the sign there of the Burgate quite clearly above the shop called Karma, which I think opened just before lockdown. Unfortunately, there. The word Burgate, I think we mentioned, was Borough Gateway. But again, if we look up there, we can see how they've done some invisible mending by replacing some of the mathematical tiles below the window ledge. So everything else has been discoloured, but the mathematical tile has been replaced. And look down the street here, we can see another way of facing buildings above the James Pringle's shop, which sadly isn't going to be there for long because I think that's closed down after COVID. But the weatherboarding was added on in the Regency period. The sort of thing you'd find in the seafaring places like Rye. It was originally designed to retard water ingress underneath towards the brick face itself. And when they when they laid on this wooden cover, the tax collectors couldn't see brick, and so they couldn't charge brick tax. They thought it was a wooden structure. The one next to it, though, strangely, in the Regency period, added on mathematical tile to make it look more modern. And if you look up there, you can see quite clearly here, if I use my stick, the fake frontage. So the window line there is just slightly where the top of the roof is, and then they've added an extra couple of inches above to make it look even more modern. So imagine if you bought that house just on spec by seeing an image on a sort of a brochure and came down and banged your head on what you thought was the top of the ceiling. Now, looking down the street the other way, that's very kind of you, Helen. Looking down here, we can see the better line of the White Bull. And this, remember, is designed to sleep around 900 people over 2 floors, so about 450 people on each floor. There was no individual rooms, there was just one huge dormitory. And the word dormitory comes from the French dormitorier, place to sleep, and you'll often find monks sleeping in dormitories. Again, we can see again where the window line here, you can see the window, what's left of the window line, using my pointy stick. There's what's left of the window. I want to come all the way across here. Again, where the archway comes up, that's where the windows would have been. So there have been 2 windows on the corner here, probably nothing on the corner there. And there again, you can see the window line coming through, but the Victorians or Georgians have put on their sash windows, so to make it much brighter and lighter in there. As we continue following down here, you can see again where the window line would have come through here. You can even see the joint, or the knuckle, where it would have come into there. And it carries on all the way across there. And they have found a restored... Sorry, we were cut off there because the cathedral doesn't like people recording. Jake, and over here, there's no signal around here, so you have to get on the cathedral about that. But if you look closely where the drain pipe comes down, you can see how thick the mathematical tiling or plaster is on the edge to make it look smooth. And if you look closely up here above, at the top floor, you can see where the plasterwork is. It makes the windows sit neat and flush. But lower down, where they've removed the plasterwork, if you look over here, you can see here, they all sit proud, these windows, so that's how much plasterwork is laid on. And you can see here there's a sort of hack marks in the wood where the Victorians hacked holes in the wood so they could key their plaster onto it. So that basically, you'll find that if you're restoring properties, you can find hack marks. It shows you when it was restored properly. So these joints that stick out still got 1 or 2 little hooks on them. There's a little hook on that one there. Well, that one there, is it quite clearly? I think I need new glasses. About time I got some new glasses. This section, by the way, this end, was restored originally by Lenleys. If you lived in Canterbury at some time, Lenleys was a furniture shop, and then it was taken over by Laura Ashley. So this end is medieval, but the far end, I mean, it's medieval above, but the far end was owned by Liberties of London. That's this one down here. And they actually wanted a medieval building below and Victorian above, whereas the Laura Ashley people wanted the other way around. They wanted medieval above and Victorian below, so that's why you got this rather interesting restoration, or sort of part restoration. And looking down again to the Buttermarket, still a few people wandering around cold, trying to think what's going on here. Now, we stand by the Edinburgh Woolen Mill shop here. No, they can't really see it from here. I'm going to try and bring my camera in. You can just about see the reflection of my ugly hat. If you look through there, you can't really see it. I'll bring it in there. Now that's looking through. That was the old entranceway to Canterbury Cathedral until 1499 when they opened the new gateway. Go to church area, please. All right. Oh, sorry. Switch this over. I've looked at something. Oh. Sorry. Sorry. Sorry about that. Right, sorry about that. Got a bit of a wiggle on there. Well, I think I got too close to the window and it got scared. If we look down... sorry about that. Yeah, no, that was my problem, Karen. Sorry about that. Yeah, it just jumped around. I'll have to correct it now. Hopefully you're still watching. That's right. Well, terrible internet in this area too, and that's why the screen kept jumping around as well. If we're looking down the street that way, I'm using my stick again, you can see the tall square tower of St Mary Magdalene Church next to St Thomas's. St Mary Magdalene Church was a Catholic church, and St Thomas's too. The Catholic Church was basically demonised during the period of the Reformation, and many Catholics had to hide in plain sight. If you were seen to be of the Catholic faith, you would have been taken away and tortured. And I'm not being flippant about the Catholic religion. It was finally restored around 1823 when Catholic people were welcomed back into the UK. At that time, people were very worried about a lot of French people coming over to worship over here, and many of the churches of England were rebuilt. Now, if you're trying to ask me the difference between Catholicism and Church of England, there's not really much different, apart from the transfiguration or transubstantiation of the sacraments. Under the Catholic faith, when you take the bread and wine, as the bread hits your mouth, it becomes the body of Christ, and the wine becomes the blood of Christ, whereas the Church of England would say, nice bit of bread and wine, something to have for Sunday lunch. The difference between Protestants and Catholics was usually they would be caught out by asking, would you prefer bread and wine or wafers and wine? The Church of England gave wafers and wine, and the Catholics took bread and wine. It's not trying to demonise any religion, but it was a big thing going on around here. If you look in the corner over here, we can just see in the ground, we can point here, that area there, you can see the entrance to one of the cellar vents, and that was only opened up in the 1980s. They found a priest hole down there too, and many priest holes we'll see around the city of Canterbury on our various tours. If you continue watching these tours with me, are where priests were hidden. It was a bit of a one-way step. Once you were in there, you couldn't really get back out, and many of them perished in there, so it's a very sad thing. Still the same picky, are you? Oh, right, well, I hope it's still coming back now. Are you there, Karen? So we're looking again on the corner. We're going to cross over now towards what is now called Black's, which is constantly being closing down. I think it will finally eventually close down, but I don't know. If you look up at the corner up here, you can see on the corner a little bit of metal sticking out. This is where the butcher's hooks were hung to mark this out as a butcher's lane. Now, that metal hook thing we see now is where butcher's hooks were hung. Now, we say the word butcher's hook now, we think of the Cockney rhyming slang language, ava butchers. Now, the Cockney language is basically rhyming couplets, and those rhyming couplets are used by people of the East End. You're still there, are you, Karen? From the old bull in. Hey? Oh, sorry, I'm reading, in case you're wondering, I'm reading messages. Hi, Dudley. Refresh if having issues. Right, okay. Right, thanks for saying it's interesting, Kim. Now, the butcher's hooks, which hung here, would have hung carcasses of meat, and they would have been basically aimed at the elements. So when we talk about hanging meat, you often think of 28-day matured Aberdeen Angus. That tends to be dry-aged, so basically it's drying closed. This is aimed at the elements, so hung up loose with maggots and flies all over it. When I was trained as a chef, I was taught that if you hang meat for longer than 28 days, the acid and the fat join together. So there's stearic acid in beef and beef fat itself. Joining those two together creates what we call saponification, which is basically soap, so it tastes soapy. Whereas game, things like grouse and venison things, the longer you hang that, the better it tastes. And we'll come on to game later on. Looking at the structure here, not everything here we see is original and old and medieval. If you're looking at these buildings and you come down in the future, look out for these striation lines. You see these straight lines across here? These are new beams because they're cut with a power saw. As far as I know, medieval people didn't use power saws. But what they have done here is try to restore as best they can the old structure. So there are some original bits of timber here, these archways here and the piece at the very top. And we think possibly this long beam across here is original. And the best way to respect medieval wood is to cut a hole in it and stick the word outdoor experts on it so that future decorators will know it's there. So again, the end piece, what they've done is they've joined these pieces of wood with a dowel, and that was the traditional way of joining wood. But this corner piece might well be original. I'm not really sure. It may all be restored, but dendrochronologists have done tests on this wood and found that some parts of it were planted around 29 AD, cut down around 950 AD and built here in 1000. So we're not quite sure of the exact dates. It may be that some of the wood was restored later on. But we certainly know that the Augustinians spent a lot of time planning before building. So they may possibly have seasoned it for 50 years before building it. We don't know for sure. Now, the cellars here, of course, which we mentioned with the priest holes, were huge, big enough to hold horses. And where we started earlier on, where the Buttermarket Square is now, there was a big ramp that took horses down to the cellars. The theory being the heat of the horses would heat the rooms above. It wouldn't be very warm. This lower section here would have been the refectory. And the refectory is where they used to serve something called peas pottage. Anybody been to Southampton or Brighton way, you might have heard of peas pottage services. Well, peas pottage was basically pea soup, split pea soup, cooked in a pot over an open fire, a hearth. And it was basically cold at night and then in the morning reheated, so constantly adding more sort of stock to it. And that's where we got the expression peas pottage hot, peas pottage cold, peas pottage in the pot 5 days old. And I'm always fascinated by bits of English phraseology, and hopefully we'll sort of discover a bit more of English phrases as we go around. As we look through in this corner here, there's a big discount sale going on, so something to look forward to there. We can see a really old piece of wood down here. We can see the hack marks here. This is a rough cut timber, but it's been beautifully carved in position and place. If you look up here, you can also see, I don't know how close I can get, but you can see here a Saxon hangnail. So these hangnails, sometimes, ladies, when you catch yourself or a nail, you get a hangnail, and this is basically what it's designed to hang bits of game on, so game hangnails. And if you look up in that section there above there, you can see in the Victorian section there, these little tiny holes here, zigzaggy line, quite neat lines. This is where gamers' hooks were originally erected. So a gamer's hook was particularly for hanging game on, to give it flavour and also to demonstrate that they had game for sale. When you hunted game, you hunted game with your hand, and that was called fair game. If you hunted with bow and arrow, it's called royal game. And royal game tends to be things like venison, but small game like partridge and pheasant could be caught by hand. Now, if we look at Barber's Hut here, we can see another section of nice windows there. And if you see the little sort of sticks hanging down, that's the hooks to hold the windows open from bang of the wind. When I came here in the 70s, this was still Burgate Bakery, and above was the Burgate Tea Rooms. And it's changed very little over the years. But look up there, you can see well, that bit of metal sticking out down there. You can see, again, striation lines where the Victorians would have smeared plaster over the top of these things. Sorry, a little COVID. And then at the very top, a nice ordinary window. These smaller windows here are called dormer windows, again from the French word dormier, and people sleeping in the attic would need the extra light to get up and going for. Now, looking at the street below us, we can also see the cobbled streets. Now, these admittedly aren't originals because they've been redone over time, but the cobbled street of Butchery Lane is a fine example of cobble streets. Now, cobble street started here in around 1610 when a man called John Speed started laying cobble streets around England. John Speed was a map maker, initially living in Whitehall. He made one of the first maps of Canterbury by climbing to the top of Bell Harry Tower and marking out the shape of the property around using what we now call 3D mapping, but it's basically he made a three-dimensional map of papier mâché and then drew lines around the ridges of the hills, which are now called contour lines, and he created what's called an ordnance survey map. Ordnance refers to cannons, and the survey was for the king, so we get Royal Ordnance Survey maps after that, and his maps are some of the earliest that we have in existence. Now, you might have heard of the Hudson Bay in America, the trading company. That's because Captain Hudson was the man who found the Hudson area, and he basically marked out the coastline and everything and brought it back to London, to Whitehall, in fact, where the mapmaker was. And the mapmaker asked the question to his assistant, what should we call the bay then? And the assistant said, well, since Captain Hudson brought it in, we better call it Hudson Bay. That's why it's called the Hudson River, simply because that's what they named it. It wasn't named by anybody, it was just named after the person who discovered it. Now, these cobble streets were, most of the cobbles themselves, these smaller stones, were ballast stones from merchant shipping. And when you think of merchant shipping, you might have heard the expression, keeping yourself an even keel. And these keel stones are basically lined the middle of the keel. So you keep yourself deep and straight in the water, you run faster for delivering your stuff to market. And cobble streets found their way to America in the same way, so that when merchants made their way to North America, when they stopped at Boston, they used to get out and get rid of their ships, and all the merchant stone was discarded on the quayside. You'll find lots of cobble streets in Boston on the east coast, and all the way down the east coast where the English trade and all the traders came to, they disgorged their ballast stones to keep them lighter on the water on their return maybe, but you'll find them in Edinburgh and other places. The longer stones down here, if we look at the ground slightly here, down here, these longer stones are called flagstones, not to be confused with pedestrian stones, which are called basically, these are not called pedestrian stones. I'm forgetting what I'm talking about, but these are basically paving stones. Pavement was another French word, pavement. But these flagstones resemble the shape of an English flag. A flag at sea usually has a V-shaped cut in the corner of it. So if I can point my stick here, sort of V-shape there. And these bits of V-shape were eventually joined together by the cloth makers, and used to tie them to bits of string and called bunting. The word bunting comes from the German language, bunt meaning colour, and a lot of colour magazines in Germany are still called Das Bunt, or the colour section. Now the V section was also a representation that it would fly better in the winds, it would flutter. If you put a straight edge on a flag at sea, it tends to shear off quite quickly, but the bunted edge was very good also for marking out when your ships were coming back to shore. You would hung out the bunting to welcome your merchant ship home, and the seaman would see his colour of bunting flying on the shore side, and that would reassure him that he was nearly home. Now, the idea was that these long stones here were where the horses' cart wheels would run on, and in the middle was where the horses' hooves would cut on. They noticed when they started laying these cobble streets in England that horses could grip better on these cobble streets than they could on basically bare mud. In the wintertime, the bare mud streets were so deep with mud and dirt that you could quite easily fall into the middle and never get out. But once they laid cobble streets down, street level became fixed in England, and so we have basically medieval street plan in England now as a result of that. You'll also notice on the very edge, these stones on the edge are called curbstones. They're granite as well. They don't tend to wear away, but you will notice certain points. Look a bit further over there, for example. It's what's called a drop curb. It's basically to help the horse and cart turn in to a courtyard or another place. We still have drop curbs where you've got a car and you're trying to get into a driveway. You apply for a drop curb now. So that's what those things are for there. So we're going to continue down here. Just a point in fact, as we look down this street of Butchery Lane, it once had 16 butcher shops in Butchery Lane and 4 pubs. Sadly, there's only 2 pubs left, and everything on this side of the street over here was destroyed in 1942 in what's called the Baedeker raid. If you've lived in Canterbury or know this area, we know that we lost quite a lot of our beautiful property in this Baedeker raid. A man called Franz Baedeker wrote a guidebook to England of all the pretty places in 1931, and still used by German tourists to this day. But when the English bombed a place called Lvov, badly, so badly in fact that this medieval town was completely destroyed, the Germans retaliated by bombing the pretty place of England and all the ones marked out by the Baedeker Guide. So Canterbury was hit as a prime target in the Baedeker raid, as it's called. Oxford and Cambridge weren't damaged so badly because Hitler decreed that he wanted the objects in the Ashmolean and Fitzwilliam museums for himself after the war to go into a place called the Kunsthalle Museum in Linz, which is where he was born in Austria. Now, although you might think this is a very slow tour, I'm just trying to fit in as much information there is as I can while I still remember it in case I get struck down by something nasty. Again, there we've got a fire exit there. I wouldn't want to come out there. That basically pops up and allows you out of an exit there. But it's really weird to look at these old doors and think, I wonder when was the last person who put a bit of letter through that door there? But let's continue down here as we do. Have you heard the expression slapdash, something that's not very well done, maybe this video? But slapdash comes from this structure above us here, or similar structure to this. If you look above you there, you can see the mathematical tile. Losing connection here. As we come down here, you'll notice that the mathematical tile has fallen away, and what a Victorian restorer has done is slapped on some plaster and dashed a line through it. If you go as close as I can over there, you can see the dashed line there isn't particularly well done. So this is an example originally of slapdash. So, sorry, I'm still losing my voice. So that's slapdash. If you've got a bit of original slapdash in your product, it's probably going to uplift your property price by a couple of quid. You never know. Everything's worth something. So we can continue down here. We'll come to the Roman Museum later on. But we're going to now have a look through one of these drop curbs and make our way into a place called Angel Court, which is just through here. This was the Angel Inn many years ago. It's now part of a structure next door called the Shakespeare. But this building here, which is now the Japanese restaurant, was Angel Court. And this is where Christopher Marlowe resided. If you look beneath my feet down here, you can see the cobblestones end and London brick. This is London brick. Extends within the courtyard. The courtyard is lined with this brick stone, and this brick was made at the London Brick Company in Hackney Marsh. We believe the reason that Hackney Marsh was created was because the brick merchants cut too deeply into their clay pits and eventually cut the water source of the River Lee, which flooded the clay pits, creating what is now marshland as the clay pits collapsed into themselves. They moved their clay pits further out of London, eventually getting to a place called Gravesend, where the graves of the Great Plague stopped being buried. They were basically burying people outside London as best they could to keep plague out of London, and that's where the graves of London's great dead ended. That's why it's called Gravesend. Of course, they keep renaming themselves. Now, there's an entranceway into the cellars down there. I don't want to go down there, but that's another vent for the cellars. And look at the height of the arch. It's a beautiful bit of archway work there. But again, this is more modern brick, probably 1740s brick. And there, up there, you can see a vent hole, possibly for a fireplace in there somewhere, or a chimney stack. But it would have been a jolly smoky place. And look, just here, you see where this is basically the edge of the wall and the old upright. Come on, right. Sorry about that. It's just blocked out there. We're going to make our way quickly then before I get locked out. Yeah, everybody lost me. Sorry there. We're going to go in through into to hopefully restore the internet connection. So let's go quickly through here and let's get through before the thing goes out again. Right, there we go. Back into the square. Now, as we look out through here, we can see this little tiny window up in the corner up there. That window there, supposedly Christopher Marlowe's garret. So that's where he lived. And the place has changed very little. If you look to the ground down here, you can still see, again, that London brick on the ground. And you can see it's still in immaculate condition. And although it's surrounded by bins and crap, we're going to make our way in here as quickly as we can so we get around there. You're going out, are you, Linda? Well, have a good day. Sorry to interrupt you. Well, hopefully watch the rest on the flip side. So we're coming out into the back end of this. This is the back garden of the Shakespeare. Again, most people would never come out here. If we're ever allowed to drink again, I'd recommend getting a large glass of white or red and sitting out here in the courtyard. Looking up above us here, we can see the edge of Angel Court again. And look at the roof shape. You see how pitched and high the roof is. When you see a roof shape like this, it really means it's a very old roof shape. And if you look at the eaves there, you can see again, there seem to be carry bag stuff at the eave, but a little tiny garret room it must have been. We know that Christopher Marlowe, when he was at school, learned about the idea of splitting things down to make better value out of something, and he created the term we call quarters, basically taking a room and splitting into 4 sections. Each one could be sublet, and that's what we got the expression married quarters from, by the period during the Battle of Waterloo. Before they went out to Waterloo, the army took over many houses in Brighton and Hove and places, and basically put officers' quarters, or married officers' quarters, into 1/4 of one Georgian room. They had a very high ceiling, used to stretch ropes in between those beams, and then hung bits of linen over those beams, those ropes, to give us a form of what's called quartering. So quarters, married quarters, comes from 1/4 of one room. And we know that Marlowe came up with this idea before he went off to Cambridge University to read English literature in around 1572. We know that when he was at Cambridge, he was recruited by a man called Lord Cecil, who was looking for spies to work in basically international operations. Now, it may seem a bit weird, but Marlowe may well have been a spy. He was an educated man. I expect that. Well, let's go back to his early life, if we may, and while we stand in this little courtyard here, and just sort of, if you're watching, you might think it's going to go a bit sort of sad and boring. And I'll keep moving it around so we get some impression of where we are. Just looking over the top there, you can just about see the top of Bell Harry's spires. We'll come to that later on. We know Marlowe was born in Canterbury. His son was his father was a shoemaker in what is now Barclays Bank. And his son was a bit of a a nice chap, but he obviously had a bit of a problem with his cash flow. He often sold and made shoes to London people who would say they'd pay him the next day, and they would basically take the shoes away with them and then go back to London. So they weren't the most reliable people down from London, imagine that. But we know that Marlowe's father ended up being in debtor's jail. At that time, if you couldn't pay your debtor's society or your bills, you basically spent your night in debtor's jail. And as a result, Marlowe was a bit of a tearaway. He would tear away in any direction. His mum couldn't look after him. At the age of 6, King's School of Canterbury, the oldest public school in England, gave him a scholarship to King's School, and he stayed there to the age of 16 when he graduated. Now, we know that he went off to university to read English, and while he was there, he was recruited, if I'm repeating myself here, by this chap called Lord Cecil. Now, Lord Cecil offered him around £400,000 a year to work undercover as a spy, but he had to pretend to be a Catholic priest, which may not sound that exciting, but at that time the whole of court was alive with conspiracies to assassinate the Queen of England. This arrived because the Queen of England, Elizabeth I, was Protestant, and the rest of Catholic Europe wanted her dead. They didn't want a Protestant spreading ideas and rumours of another religion, and so most of the courts of Europe were alive with ideas to assassinate the Queen. The Pope had even decreed that anyone worth his salt, if you heard that expression, basically a salt being a ration given to Roman centurions, now called a salary, salary meaning salt. Any man worth his salt would be paid out 10 times the cost of an assassination attempt on Her Majesty the Queen, if successful. So if she died, you got paid out 10 times the cost. Now, Marlowe went off to a place called Delft in Holland to train as a Catholic priest, which is pretty easy because he looked like a Catholic, grey square-cut beard, all that, and he wore a rough collar, which eventually became the sign of a spy. You probably heard the expression, to be caught in the rough. Basically, anybody wearing a rough collar was a spy of the Catholic Church later on, though. And we know that when Marlowe was at university, he was tempted. I mean, if somebody offered me £400,000 to work as a spy, I might think, I'll give it a try. He spoke French, he spoke Italian, he spoke Latin, and he spoke good English, so he could probably pass himself off as an Italian courtier. We know that he went to Genoa and Verona to work in the courts over there. And while he was there, he uncovered many plots to assassinate the Queen of England. Now, to send these plots back, he obviously didn't send them in a letter to Walsingham or Cecil. He sent them in encrypted format. You might have heard of the word a sonnet. Well, a sonnet is basically a way of encrypting information to send back to a foreign source. Now, most things of encrypted stuff was sent back from a place called the Brenner Pass, which is controlled by the Austrians. So if you go through the top of Italy, you'll find the Brenner Pass. It's the only way to make your way back up into Austria. Now, we know that Marlowe was sent a cyclist of some kind using a piece of leather which would be folded out over a parchment. The piece of leather had holes cut in the leather which would allow him to write various code words within this parchment. And once he completed his 30-letter codex, he would remove the remove the leather, revealing 30 random words on a piece of paper. He had to fill the gaps in with something called blank verse. You might have heard of blank verse. Basically, if he could make rhyming couplets so that each line rhymed with each other, so a pair of couplets, basically 2 lines together, 10 lines of couplets together make something called iambic pentameter, which is what Shakespeare used, and that was basically a sonnet. Now, he used to write these sonnets off to the Earl of Southampton, and he was given a nom de plume, a pen name, to sign them off on. He wouldn't use his own name, Marlowe. He was given the nom de plume of Shakespeare, not William Shakespeare, the word Shakespeare. It was quite a common name then, used in the spying circles. So if the people of Austria uncovered these plots, they'd see that this chap Shakespeare was sending love notes to a man called the Earl of Southampton, so clearly he needed getting rid of if he was of that persuasion. And Marlowe returned years later, after about 3 years undercover, to university at Cambridge to collect his degree. Now, I'm sure there are some people on here being at university and they know they have to study very hard to get a bloody degree. Marlowe, of course, thought that because he was doing lawful service to the Queen, he should get the degree anyway. And when he returned to the Chancellor of Corpus Christi, he was told by the Chancellor, I assumed you were dead. You've been away for 4 years. What were you expecting? And Marlowe said, well, I've been out saving lives. The Chancellor said, well, I don't care what you've been doing. You've got to come and study. Marlowe didn't agree. So he went to see his man Cecil, who had a word with Walsingham, who had the Queen's ear. And the Queen gave the Dean of Corpus Christi a choice between losing his head or granting Marlowe a first-class degree with honours from Cambridge University. What do you think the Dean chose? Well, I'll answer that in one step. He chose to save his head, and Marlowe was the talk of the town. Returned to London a few weeks later, he was regarded as one of the sort of people that could write plays, of course, plays were reserved for only rich people, people like Bungay, for example. And we know that when he was in London, he probably interacted with William Shakespeare, the chap from Stratford, who certainly wrote a few good plays. And we know that he wrote 4 plays, published ones: Dr. Faustus, The Jew of Malta, which at that time was a sort of traditional play, as they didn't like Jewish people at that time, very anti-Semitic London was. And he also wrote a play called Tridus and Cressidi, and another one called Dr. Faustus. Did we mention that one? Well, Dr. Faustus is about a man who sold his soul to the devil for 17 years extra life. I can't imagine anybody doing that. No politician would sell his soul for 17 years extra life. No, surely not. No Conservatives. No, they're all charming people. Now, we're going to go back out to the outside world, and hopefully we don't lose each other here. If it goes off for a second, it's simply because I'm going through this section here. But look at the floor again here. You see how damaged it is over the years, and there's a bit of concrete come down here as well. But it's you see that line down there? That's where the water was designed to run away to the drain to. And courtyards like this, they're called courtyards because they were no more than about 3 foot wide, some of them. If you go to Glasgow, you'll find the courtyards up there. Just to mention here, there's a barrel here, and these barrels are generally where men would bathe. Now, I know men do bathe regularly now, but they didn't used to. In the period of Marlowe, they used to have a bath once a year, needed to or not, and they would bathe in a barrel like this. The barrel would be filled in April when the rains came, and by May it was warm enough to sit outside in the barrel. And generally, if you had a family, it would be the master of the house bathed first, and then his sons, and then his younger sons, then his daughters, and then his wife, and then finally the babies would be washed in the same water. By the end, it was quite possible, though filthy these people were, it was quite possible to throw the baby out with the bath water, and frequently it really did happen. So although it's an expression, don't throw the baby out with the bath water, it probably did happen at one time in their life. But let's make our way back out to Butchery Lane. As we do so, we're going to try and look at the great Bell Harry Tower, although it's probably shrouded in mist this time of day, so coming back out to the outside world. Get locked out, cut up. So we're going back out to Butchery Lane again. We're lucky didn't lose the signal there. Now the lane has changed very little since we've been out, and we haven't really travelled in time. If we look over here, we can see the great Bell Harry Tower. I can't really explain this too clearly, but it won't let you zoom either. But Bell Harry was built of brick and then faced with stone. The stone we see before us is cornerstone from Normandy, and thanks, Kim. The stone was built in situ, so a bit like Winchester Cathedral. They actually shinned themselves down on ropes, sitting on bosun's chairs, and chiselled those beautiful carvings out by hand. If they dropped their chisel, of course, somebody might die, but if they themselves fell to their death, they were guaranteed a place in heaven. So it was all worth it, really. Now, when we look at the tower, we can see the slits in the roof where the bell tower should be. That's not where the bell is located. It's actually located on the very top of the bell tower itself. And that's because when they tried to haul the bell up through the middle of the tower, they left a hole for the bell. When they hauled the bell up, they found the hole was just tightly too small for the bell itself. And in that section there where we look at now is still a human treadmill designed to haul stone up originally to build the tower, but when they finished their work they couldn't get the treadmill out, so they left the treadmill where it is, and that's another reason the bell has been moved up to the very top. Moved up to the very top in 1953 for the arrival of the Duke of Edinburgh and the Queen of England to look around the cathedral. They came back more recently, but if you look in the foreground you can see a little roundy tower here. This is called the Lantern Tower, and this is to help the deaf congregants work out when the bell service is going on. There's no point in ringing a bell for a deaf group, they're not going to hear it anyway. But the Lantern Tower, illuminated down the street, told people when the services were on. Now the curfew bells, which we talked about earlier on, were still rung, and they're still rung to this day. When you hear the bell ring, it rings at about 5:15 or 5:14 and at 8:14 in the morning. The reason for that being that when the bell was first re-erected in the 1960s, originally the clergyman would have to run up the Lantern Tower to the roof to get to ring the bell. And an ex-Royal Navy surgeon who came to become a clergyman in the cathedral in the 1960s decided there must be an easier way. So he organised an electronic clapper mechanism on that top roof up there and used the timing device of a tease maid, if you remember the tease maid from your childhood, and that worked fine because it was electric and it would automatically ring a clapper at 8 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night. But in 1972, we had something called the 3-day week, very popular with the Labour government, and that affected power cuts. And there was a power cut that was only for about 14 minutes, but it cut the power of 14 minutes. And when it restarted, the bell rang late. It still rings to this day at 8:15 and at 5:15 at night. So when you hear the bell, you might think it's an odd time to ring. And that's the reason why, because the clock retarded by 15 minutes, and they've never fixed it. And why would they? It's now traditional, of course. If you're any local person, what time's the curfew bell ring? Well, it's 5:14, isn't it? That's when it starts ringing automatically. And, well, that's true or not. I've always told that by a man called Cardinal Basil Hume. Now, coming back on this street, now we're standing by the Roman Museum, literally beneath my feet. We can see the rather nice mosaic put up in the Millennium. It's sadly closed at the moment because of COVID, but if you have a chance to go in here, what they found beneath what was originally the Long Market of Canterbury, which stood behind this structure here, was a beautiful Roman house and a marketplace. And at the Roman period, where we stand was near the edge of the Roman city. The Burgate in front of us was the Roman city wall, and the cathedral was built outside the city wall when it was refounded by Augustine. His cathedral was wood, and the original structure burned down, and then the next one was built of stone, but unfortunately had a slight earthquake which collapsed itself, so they built the next one of wood, and then that burned down. Wasn't really very lucky. Just after Thomas Becket's death, there was another big fire, and the only thing that was left was the great altar and the undercroft. So they restored and rebuilt the cathedral we see before us now at around 1490. The tower was built by a man, called John Morton, who gave his money in his will to the Church of Canterbury. He introduced a tax on every living person called Morton's Fork. You might have heard of Morton's Fork, or the expression, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. John Morton said if you paid his tax, which is basically to replace something called poll tax, very unpopular in 1381, if you paid his tax, you had more money in the sense that if you didn't pay his tax, you were going to burn in hell. So you were damned if you do, you were damned if you didn't. Still this day, every time you cast a vote, still Morton's Fork seems to apply. Now, the tower itself was protected from the bombing raids of the 1940s by people called fire watchers, who were volunteer firefighters, and they took it upon themselves to protect the roof of the cathedral from incendiary bombs which landed on Canterbury Cathedral. It wiped most of Canterbury out, but we're very lucky that this bit survived. So this is really the edge of medieval Canterbury. That's all that's left of it. Everything from here on the other way, this way, has all been replaced. It's in the 1970s and 80s. Now we're going to turn around the other way and come back down here, because if you haven't been down Butchery Lane in a long time, you will know that there was for many years a key cutting shop here called Timson's, and that closed in March last year, and it's been refurbished into I'm assuming it's going to become some luxury clothing brand or something, because we're very short of clothes shops in Canterbury, and God bless them. But this structure over here, if you remember, the 80s was the first pizza restaurant officially of Canterbury, called Sweeney Todd's, and it's now called Café Moresque. Hopefully that will reopen again, because they're lovely tagines in the cellars. And the cellars themselves are the cellars to the old butcher shop, which is called Neil's, which closed in about 1971, the last butcher shop on Butchery Lane. If you remember your childhood, there used to be butcher shops all over the high street. We had Neil's, we had Dewhurst and Matthews, but we don't have any butcher shops anymore. We've just got Tesco's stuff. I mean, nothing wrong with Tesco's and Morrison's, but that's basically done the death for butchers, because it's a skill and it takes a long time to learn butchery. I had to learn butchery at school, not at school, but college, when I was trained as a chef, and it is a very skilled process. I would never claim to be a good butcher, but I was taught to cut meat up in various sections, and I still have that skill. If we have a little peek through the window there, we can have a look in, and I hope we don't lose our signal. Look in there, not much to see probably. Lots to see, it's just sort of out of focus, but that's... I did have a visit in there in the late 90s. I went in there just to have a snook around, and I found that they still had the old butcher's hooks and everything in the old butcher shop at the back. Let's have a peek in here through the side door here, because again it's hardly ever open. And if we look into the roof space up here, we can still see the. If you look up there, you can still see the butcher's hooks in place, and this is one of the places where the carcasses of the butcher's lane would have come out through. and still see the sliding doors to one side over here. It's been sliding over for many years. And here's this bit of metal here that will be for hoisting the carcasses up and down with. The archway is quite solid, but you can see up here the open structure of the building above. So the ties have been taken away there. But you can see they put some reinforcements in there to stop the thing falling apart. But it's fascinating here, although it shouldn't really be in here. I'm going to get ticked off by somebody. But it's a fire escape and a fire exit. It does say, smokers, do not put your rubbish on the bins. So we're coming... Let's get the crap out of me. We're coming back out to the High Street. And it's rather sad, really, looking at the High Street now. There's still, a few shops open. Not quite sure why Pandora is allowed to be open. Somebody explain that to me? But that's Pandora. And on the other side we've got NatWest Bank. But we're coming to the edge of Butchery Lane up here. As you can see our little sign up there on the corner of HSBC. And back onto the High Street. And when we look down the High Street here, we can just about see St George's Church Tower down the far end there. That's where Christopher Marlowe was baptised and christened. And hopefully you've enjoyed my little walk around the city. Oh, this has only been a couple of streets. And thank you all for joining us in the virtual world. And I just hope to God that we can do this in person soon, safely, hopefully, thank you all for visiting, and please do make a contribution if you can. It's paypal.me/Canterbury Ghost Tour / whatever your contribution could be. But thank you all for joining me. See, I've got 25 live, and so thousands of other people are going to watch this later on, I hope. But thank you all for joining me. I'm just going to sign off with my grotty face. There you go, there we are. That's me signing off. Thank you so much for joining me, and it's been a great pleasure. I'm so proud that I live in this lovely city, and please do tell your friends about this little video, and hopefully we'll see you soon. God bless you all.